Hey, good morning. Thanks everyone for joining. It is 11 o'clock and we're looking forward to getting started on this webinar. This is Clint Boylston, currently speaking account executive at eGroup. I'm gonna wait about another 2 or 3 minutes before we actually dive into the presentation and the demonstration of Rubrik, just to let some of the last few folks join us. And I'll go over some housekeeping notes as well. So looking forward to discussing this with you guys today. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. All right, looks like we're starting to level out on attendees. As I say that, a couple more people are joining us, but we'll go ahead and get started. Assuming Ryan is back with us. Ryan, are you out there still?
Yeah, sure am.
Awesome, great. Well, want to thank all of our attendees for joining us so far this morning, and really just want to give, thank you all for the support on this. We've had an unbelievable turnout on registration. So we appreciate all the support that you guys are providing to eGroup and Rubrik, and look forward to sharing the content today and the presentation that Ryan's put together along with the demonstration of Rubrik, and look forward to learning a little bit more about how Rubrik's really taken the data protection world by storm, and really the data management world as well. So we'll dive into that. But before I get into the agenda for today, just a couple of housekeeping notes for everyone to know. If you have questions throughout the presentation and demo, feel free to ask those in the questions box. I will be looking at that throughout today's presentations, and we'll answer any and all questions at the end of the speaking portion. So we'll save the questions till the end. One other thing to note is that for the Grubhub, Uber Eats, gift cards, all of those things, we will get those vouchers out to you guys before the day is over with. Given the high volume of support on this webinar, which is great to see, just bear with us. We promise we'll get those out, and you should see those throughout the day today. But we are in the process of kind of working through that, and it may not happen right at noon, but we'll get it to you as soon as possible. And finally, if you registered for the webinar and you are attending with a colleague and you're just logged in through your colleague's account, please go log into the GoToWebinar yourself. That way we can make note that you are attending this webinar, and we'll make sure you get the Grubhub, Uber Eats, all DoorDash, all of those great, whatever you put down, we'll make sure you get that voucher. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started with today's presentation. And just quickly to kind of lay out the agenda and flow for today, did not put the slide together for this, but just briefly stating, So I'm going to intro eGroup and why eGroup is important to the conversation with Rubrik and how we're protecting data and helping customers today. So I'll go through that. Then I'll pass it over to Ryan Huffstetter, who is a sales engineer manager at Rubrik in the Southeast, and he's going to talk a little bit about Rubrik at a high level, but then we're going to dive into the demonstration of Rubrik as well. Let's really see how easy it is to protect and manage your data with Rubrik. And from there, we'll go on to a Q&A and we'll wrap up. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. So who is eGroup? So eGroup, we are an IT solutions provider. We've been in business for over 20 years, really focused on delivering speed and certainty with IT services in mind, really in the data center and public cloud space. We're a debt-free, self-funded organization. And why that matters is just that, we want to let you know that our chief investors are you guys, our clients. So we are 100% a customer satisfaction driven organization, and what we care about the most is our customer satisfaction. So diving a little bit deeper in on what exactly we do around speed and certainty in IT services. So we have a data center practice, and we're kind of really where we find ourselves in that space today is really helping organizations with their business continuity and disaster recovery strategies. And, Rubrik's a big part of that conversation, and as well as, just making sure you've got the proper policies in place and procedures in place to keep your business up and running through any time and any pandemic that is unforeseen, such as the one we're going through right now with COVID-19. We also have a heavy practice in the private, public, and really hybrid cloud services space. We understand that not every workload makes sense to just host in the public cloud at all times, and there's great opportunities to sort of create your own private cloud with your on-prem data center. So what we really start to find ourselves in today, and really where the industry is taking us, is really helping organizations embrace the hybrid cloud, and how Rubrik is also a big part of that. We also have an application services team to really help with automation, workflow, and business intelligence. And then just sort of a couple of notes to make in terms of our partnership with Rubrik. We are a national Rubrik managed solution provider. And what that essentially means, we just have access to some resources and flexibility within the Rubrik team to help make sure we deliver the best offering to you as the customer. And finally, as Rubrik, we'll talk a little bit about the cloud and the public cloud and how you can sort of move data around. eGroup, we have a national partnership with Microsoft, and we are a nationally managed Microsoft Azure partner. So something to keep in mind as well, and how Rubrik really leads in that field. Rubrik was Microsoft's #1 ISV co-sell last year, so they have a very strong partnership with Microsoft. And as a partner of both, we've been able to kind of been the glue to help organizations really embrace both technologies. So what are we seeing going on in the marketplace right now, right? And it's interesting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing currently since COVID sort of pushed us into a position to work from home. But even before that, we noticed in a lot of industry research has shown that business leaders are wanting IT to create business results and continuously improving upon innovation and making sure business processes are fluid and functioning. And where organizations are figuring out where they fit in that is that hybrid cloud model, especially in the enterprise space, and understanding that not all workloads make sense to move to the public cloud. Those that do make sense, absolutely move them. Make the most economical choice for your business, but also creating that private cloud environment for your on-premises workloads, and then really investing in that hybrid cloud strategy. And when you do that, you really want to focus in on the data protection platform, right? And that's kind of where we're going to focus the conversation today. Data protection, business continuity continues to be a top concern, especially as we've seen the new work from home strategies and policies that we've been forced to put into place, given the pandemic and the need to socially distance. So the challenge sort of remains on how we create that business continuity strategy. It's still cited as one of the top challenges for businesses as we move not only into 2020, but into 2021 as well. And then how we keep our data protected, right? I mean, since COVID-19 pandemic sort of forced the work from home platform, we've really noticed an increase in enterprise ransomware attacks. So enterprise ransom payments have gone up in Q1 of 2020 by 33% from Q4 of 2019, with the average ransom being paid, it was roughly $111,000. And with those ransom attacks, the average days of downtime has been roughly 15 days. And the downtime is very important to just kind of make note of, right? I mean, getting hit by ransomware is awful, but the 15 days of downtime is really where, businesses struggle to survive through these sorts of catastrophic hits. And that is a big piece to remember as we go through the presentation of Rubrik, is the 15 days of downtime. You don't want to deal with that. No one does. And Rubrik does a great job of helping you never have to face a 15-day downtime if you were hit by ransomware. And eGroup obviously is a big part of that conversation as well, right? So we have that focus of delivering speed and certainty with hybrid cloud solutions in mind and protecting data centers. We've been doing it for over 2 decades, working with highly sophisticated organizations, several of which are on this webinar today. And we help sort of try to lead them down the path of investing in innovation and really staying on the top line of what technologies are working in the marketplace and being on the cutting edge of technology. And we also provide managed services to our customers to help them embrace this technology and really push innovation forward. And we've packaged these solutions up into offerings that allow you to quickly consume and quickly leverage the technologies that are at your disposal. And being a Rubrik partner is a big component of that, especially as we continue to have the deeper conversations around data protection and management. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and pass it over to Ryan just to dive into really the focus of this conversation on cyber resiliency and protecting yourself from ransomware, everyone's worst nightmare. So Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Clint. So again, my name is Ryan Huffstetler. I'm a SE manager based out of Atlanta. I cover the Southeast. Little background on me before we hop in. I've been with Rubrik for about 3.5 to 4 years. Prior to that, I've spent my whole career in data protection and infrastructure. But with that said, let's dive in. So the agenda that we're going to walk through today, I'm going to give you a Rubrik introduction, and that introduction is going to have a focus on kind of our strength from a cybersecurity standpoint. I'm going to walk you through a ransomware primer, if you will, talking about like the current landscape, the anatomy of an attack, and then really how does Rubrik help combat and help our customer base recover and be fully protected. Rest assured that you're fully protected when a ransomware attack does hit. So with the introduction, so kind of tying off to what Clint was talking about. I mean, last year when the FBI kind of released a report on the ransomware market, it was projected to be about $1 billion for the first time, or over $1 billion for the first time in 2020. At that time, the average ransom was around $86,000. So when you see that increase going to over $111,000 already in Q2 versus Q1, or Q1 versus Q4 of last year, a large increase. I mean, that's just the average. There's a lot of folks that are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in some instances, is even millions of dollars, depending on the criticality of the data and the scope of the impact. But I mean, the bottom line is a lot of questions get asked, like, why would anybody pay the ransom? I mean, doesn't everybody have backups? And the answer to that is really threefold. So number one, end users or folks are paying that ransom because of that lengthy downtime that Clint mentioned. Last year, that average time, according to Forrester, was 7.3 days. But given how ransomware is always evolving, that downtime has actually increased based on the findings that we've seen this year already. That it's in addition to that 7.3 days from last year and now 15, what according to the polls, most organizations, or many organizations, after a couple of days of waiting for their IT team to recover from that ransomware event, a lot of times the organizations just choose to pay that ransom. So, hey, I can't afford to be down, therefore I need to pay that ransom just to get back up because it's taken too long. Second reason is just frankly unable to recover. The ransomware industry, if you will, is getting more advanced and has been targeting backups, online backups specifically, and trying to encrypt and delete those completely. That way, you're more likely to actually pay that ransom because your storage of last resort has been removed as a way that you can recover from an event. Another reason is resorting to offsite backups such as tape means that even longer RTO. So organizations are being forced to pay that ransom just because of the time. Time is money, and if your business is down, it's costing the organizations quite a bit. And then in third, it's lack of visibility. Okay, maybe my backups are okay and have not been impacted, but how do I find out, like, what's the scope of the damage? How do you look at millions of files and potentially billions of files across the organization and find out what's been impacted? And even if you do, how do you set up the recovery process? How long does that take? So pretty big challenges for organizations, and I mean that's big reasons why folks are paying the ransoms versus being able to recover from it with their infrastructure. So Rubrik's approach addresses all three of these major reasons folks are paying the ransom. First and foremost, we provide instant recovery. So I mean we've had this since day one in the product. The simplicity of our instant recovery is one of the reasons Rubrik's been catapulted and been so disruptive in the market. We can easily allow customers to reduce that RTO down from hours, days on large infrastructure down to seconds and minutes. So recovery process is extremely simple and extremely fast. And second is native immutability. We have a lot of players in the market that are claiming immutability, but Rubrik has a unique immutable file system. Our file system was purpose-built for data protection, and when we say it's immutable, we mean that the data cannot be changed. So the ability to modify the data once it's written is not even in the file system itself. So the immutability is a big piece. That's the first component of our data protection story and our protection against ransomware. You can rest assured once data is written to Rubrik, it absolutely cannot be changed. It's built into the system that way. Impact visibility is the third reason. So hey, it's one thing to know you've been hit with ransomware. It's another thing to know how big the attack is and the depth of the attack across your entire infrastructure. What servers are impacted, what files within those servers were impacted. The idea is to minimize the amount of data I'm losing versus having to go back and holistically recover my entire environment. So how does Rubrik work? We call it plug and play. Like the Rubrik appliance, whether it's a physical appliance or a virtual appliance, once that's racked and stacked in the data center, it takes about 15 minutes to bootstrap and install the cluster, and then after that, it's simple credentials that automatically discover your virtual environment. I mean, typically, if I'm going to go in and help a customer install a cluster, go in early in the morning at 9 a.m., get racked and stacked, and by the time we're going to lunch, we're already doing backups. So it's very quick and easy to install and get plugged into your environment. Again, live mounts are keys. Not only live mounts for virtual machines, but for actually SQL and Oracle databases as well. I can instantly recover that part of the infrastructure and those applications, getting you back in business faster. And secure. Not only are we a completely immutable file system, but we also have end-to-end encryption. From a data source to the Rubrik cluster data at rest, and then if we're ever sending it off to maybe another Rubrik cluster for disaster recovery, or maybe a public or private cloud for long-term retention, the data is encrypted along the way and at rest wherever it lands. And then alerting. So being able to detect anomalies within that environment. The idea is to get business value out of your backup and infrastructure versus it just be sitting there collecting dust waiting for a restore to happen. How can I leverage that backup infrastructure and the metadata more specifically off that backup infrastructure and detect anomalies and let you know that, hey, we think we see something you probably want to know about. And then once we have that alert, that granular visibility to be able to assess, where you've been attacked and exactly what files have been attacked within the environment, and give you a recovery plan to restore and get back in business, and only recover the data that's been impacted. That's huge. So I kind of told you how we do it, but what is Rubrik in general? In a nutshell, Rubrik is we consolidate data protection. So when you look at a legacy environment, there's a lot of different components that you have to acquire. There's a lot of different components that you have to manage. There's a lot of different components that scale separately, all single points of failures throughout. Very complex. When you look at like the data center as a whole on the production side, it's evolved over time, but the backup infrastructure over time really hasn't. It's stayed the same, and you're trying to protect a modern environment with a very aged infrastructure architecture. Rubrik collapses all of that down into a single software fabric that can protect on-premise workloads as well as data in the cloud with AWS, Azure, and Google, all in a single scale-out fabric. Collapses it all down into to one easy point to manage for your hybrid workloads. And what we're going to go through today is mainly based on our cyber resiliency. I'm happy to have a follow-up and dive deeper into the product and support as well. But with that said, I'll jump in and give everyone a kind of a ransomware primer today. So in the fourth quarter, we saw an increase of 148% according to McAfee.
I was away. Did we get the XP assigned yet? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, let me figure out what's going on there. Sorry about that, Ryan.
No worries. I was trying to mute him. You're good. It happens. So, but in the fourth quarter, I mean, we saw an increase of 148% of ransomware attacks. Not only an increase of attacks, but new families are always being introduced. And there's new techniques that the criminals are using to crack into to your infrastructure, right? And that continues to increase. That number is probably much higher based on the Q1 numbers. But the idea, I mean, it's real. I mean, it's getting more expensive by the minute, and it's getting worse. There's no specific industry or vertical that is targeted. Nobody is immune to it. It seems like every day when I log on and go through the most up-to-date articles, there's somebody else that's been impacted. Lots of state agencies, lots of healthcare, lots of education. We see there's a marked increase in attacks, but again, nobody's immune. The attackers are going to go out there and try to blanket the world and get everybody's money. But one of the changing landscapes that we're all dealing with, and Clint touched on this at the beginning, is working remotely. And because of the COVID the COVID-19 kind of workplace, if you will, attackers are starting to leverage and have been leveraging different use cases to be able to get in and all right, I was having a mute problem. Sorry, guys. But as the workplace evolves, so are the ransomware folks. So are the criminals. They're leveraging different types of phishing attacks to be able to get people as they're working at home. So always evolving, always changing. I mean, one of the things I was born and raised in the South. I'm a big SEC football fan, and one of the things that I watch is Saturdays Down South on ESPN, and one of the things that stuck with me was, defense are always a little bit behind. Like, you're always adapting to all the innovations on the offensive side, and the defenses have to adapt. And ransomware detection is And security is very much like that. You know, you don't know a ransomware signature until it's seen for the first time. So you're always playing defense. So you have to have multiple layers of protection and storage. Your data, your backups are that protection of last resort, and that's not going to change. Right? But when you look at industry averages, it takes days. I mean, we've talked about that a few times. It takes days to actually identify an anomaly. And then when you look at the McAfee reports, there's 50% of all cybersecurity professionals don't believe their organization is prepared to repel a ransomware attack, and they don't believe their organization is prepared to actually recover from a ransomware attack once it's in. What's your remediation plan? And a lot of folks say, hey, I don't have one. Then furthermore, it takes days to weeks to diagnose. Like once I'm in there, and this is what Clint was talking about from downtime, it's not the cost of the ransom that's the major, that's the only cost associated with it. 43%, according to Accenture, is actually related to information loss. So data loss caused by the ransomware. Maybe it's downtime, maybe it's because I'm having to destroy good data to recover the encrypted data while I'm doing it. And then how long does it take me to restore when my business is down? I mean, that increases the cost as well. So could take hours to days in a small attack, could take months in a longer attack. And an example of that, and we can't give out the name because of privacy reasons, but a very large North American industrial equipment company was hit with ransomware. It only took them 3 days to actually find it, which is terrible. You want to find it on day one, but it took them 3 days, but it took them 2 weeks after they found it to actually recover. And the cost to the business was $300 just in recovery costs alone. So the cost and the impact goes far beyond just actually what you have to pay for that ransom. Typically, the way a ransomware attack works is there's a campaign, there's a distribution network. The cyber criminals are pretty advanced in how they go about trying to get folks to click on the links and install what's called a dropper, and that dropper hits in an environment. And what that dropper does is actually typically download an executable file, which installs that ransomware itself. Once that's installed, it starts staging itself. It puts its hooks in, embeds itself in that system, may try to replicate itself to other systems as well, and then establishes persistency. So a simple reboot isn't going to actually clean it up. But once it's installed and persistent, that's when that scanning process starts. It goes throughout the environment, both locally and across the network, and is looking for data to encrypt and back up. And in a lot of cases, with some of the more recent attacks we've seen, it tries to find those backups first. If your backup is on the network and accessible via storage, then it's accessible to ransomware actually finding it and either encrypting it or deleting it. Right? But once the program finds what it's looking for, that's when the encryption starts. Could go slowly through the environment, but there's actually a recent Wall Street Journal article that came out earlier this week. So I read it on Monday, to where they're changing their strategy because of the COVID crisis in healthcare specifically. Instead of letting it creep through the environment, it blasts through the environment very quickly, and that way they can ask for the ransom quicker versus letting it stage throughout that environment. So it's always evolving. And then once it's encrypted, hey, that's when the ransom note gets sent out and says, hey, pay me or I'm going to delete your data. Right? And then the panic begins. So a lot of folks, when we talk about ransomware, especially on the infrastructure side, it's, hey, we have our security folks deal with that. We have up-to-date firewalls. We have encryption everywhere. We have antivirus software. But the problem is the human firewall that often breaks down when ransomware actually breaks through. The human error is always going to occur. It's hard to stop. It's hard to prevent. You can educate, but it's hard to stop somebody from clicking on something not unknowingly and install ransomware within the environment. But so prevention is essential, but attacks are still going to happen. you have multiple layers of security and prevention, but ultimately your backup data is your storage of last resort. I mean, that's where your fail safe has to be. You have to be 100% 100% sure that my backup data is immutable and inaccessible. I can always have that as my go-to to recover from. You know, and to kind of hammer it home a little bit, a SOFO source from last year, when they polled companies that were hit with ransomware, 75% of them were running up-to-date endpoint protection. 75% of the companies who were infected by ransomware were running up-to-date endpoint protection, yet ransomware was able to infiltrate and infect their environment. So the idea is, hey, I'm impacted, I'm infected, now how fast can I recover, and what is my recovery plan? So that's where Rubrik comes in. I mean, it starts with our immutability. Immutable backups are a must. You have to have immutable backups in order to have proper defense against ransomware. This was in that same FBI report that I referenced earlier, but you have to have a backup infrastructure that cannot be changed, altered, or deleted. Right? When you look at immutability and compare it against like a traditional architecture, as long as that disk-based backup is on the network, you're susceptible. Right? So almost every legacy provider, and then some of the more modern ones that may double as a NAS, have a disk-based backup solution. If that storage is presented on the network in any shape or form as a read-write, then it's accessible to immutable, or it's accessible to being deleted and encrypted. Rubrik, we have that immutable file system. We're purpose-built. It's append only. Data cannot be modified. It can only be appended to. Therefore, it can't be changed and can't be deleted. It gives us a couple of advantages, right? And one of that is, hey, you can't get it. It's not on the network as well. We have that natural air gap protection. What I mean by that is Rubrik does not present its storage to the world, if you will. It's tightly coupled and tightly controlled within the Rubrik infrastructure. Therefore, it's never online. But even if it was, again, there is no delete. There is no modify. There is only append. So you have a bulletproof backup system. Now, typically recovery is a heavy lift. I've been hit, right? So, hey, I've identified an anomaly. There's something within my environment. Either I've got a ransom note or somebody clicked on a file and it's not there or it's encrypted. Now what do? I have to diagnose that impact. I've got to go throughout my environment and try to find where it's infiltrated and how big the scope of the attack was. And then I have to recover the files. What if it's millions of files, like spread across, you know, hundreds of servers? Pretty difficult to actually set that recovery up. And hey, what do I want to recover first? And how long is it going to take me to recover? It may take me days and weeks to diagnose the impact. It may take several days to actually recover and weeks to actually do the recoveries once that's done. So pretty time consuming, right? It's an extremely heavy lift, and it's never 100%. There's often going to be things that are missed. Right? So your recovery options, you know, hey, with the meat cleaver method. So I'm going to do a mass rollback. I know ransomware hit, you know, 8 days ago, so I'm going to recover all my data to 9 days, that last known good the day before. It's a standard approach oftentimes, because it's the you take that meat cleaver to it, you take that sledgehammer to it, and I'm just gonna lose. The problem with it though is that you lose a lot of good data. If I do that mass rollback and maybe I only have less than 5% of the files in my data center were affected, why would I want to get rid of the 95% of good data that's meaningful to the business? There's a reason why I had that data and why I've saved that data and backed it up. There's also the surgical approach. So why go after it with a meat cleaver if I just need to take a scalpel and take out that 5%, right, and take that back to normal? That's where Rubrik Polaris with Radar comes in. So what's Polaris? So what we're trying to do from a backup standpoint, and I mentioned it earlier, is ultimately transforming your backup data into a business asset. You have a hybrid environment. You probably have multi-site environments. You may be in the cloud. Polaris is that single record, that single source of truth, if you will, that harnesses the power of the metadata across all the different silos within the environment. And the secret sauce of Polaris is how we universally capture all the metadata, no matter where it lives in your environment, if we're backing it up, how we organize it, and then how we deliver value-added operations on top of it. The first application that we introduced for Polaris, this SaaS metadata lake, if you will, was global management. So the ability to manage all of my Rubrik environments, no matter where they were across different data centers, different clouds, etc. The second one is our ransomware recovery offering. That's what we're going to focus on here, and that's the automated ransomware detection and recovery remediation from an event. I can detect that anomaly, and then I can help you remediate from it. Awesome thing is hey, we're already gathering the metadata. It's extremely simple to turn this on. It's literally a checkbox within Polaris, and then hey, which Rubrik instances do I want to start using Radar for? Extremely simple. The second was Office 365 protection. So within this Polaris SaaS offering, giving you the ability to protect my Office 365 applications and protect it in a way to where the data never leaves your Azure subscription. We often find that our customers say, hey, data born in the cloud, we want it to stay in the cloud, right? So why would I want to bring that data back on premise or send it somewhere else when I can have it live in my Azure subscription? In addition, Office 365 Cloud Native, giving you cloud application protection for AWS, Azure, and actually now GCP environments as well. So giving you that same pane of glass, if you will, that same management place within Polaris to protect those applications too. And the most recent application we've released within Polaris is what's called Polaris Sonar. So again, using that metadata we're already collecting, it's not a heavy lift for us to enable it. There's no impact to your production environment, no impact to the performance of your backup environment. But let's use what we've collected and get more business value out of it. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to look for classification. So maybe I have HIPAA, for example. I'm a healthcare organization, and I want to look for any HIPAA data throughout my environment. I want to make sure that I'm protecting it with the SLA that the business has demanded and is required to do. And if not, what's the remedy for me to actually protect that and make sure I stay in compliance and don't hit any fines, etc. But again, what we're going to focus on is Radar going forward. So our approach with Radar is using machine-based anomaly detection. I'm going to identify that abnormal behavior. Once that abnormal behavior is identified, I'm going to do a granular impact assessment. Again, I'm going to go, hey, what's that blast radius? What's been impacted, and how can we help you build that remediation plan? And then once we figure out and alert you, hey, here's the breadth of the infection. You know, how can I help you recover? You can rest assured that the data is fine within Rubrik. It's immutable. It's never in read-write mode, which means it can't be overwritten. So the data is always going to be there, and then give you the ability to do a one-click recovery, whether I want to restore an entire virtual machine or whether I want to use that scalpel method and only recover the files that's been impacted. And I'll show you what that looks like in the demo here in a second. So how Radar works, if you look at like every backup that we take or snapshot is a linear data point. You know, once we collected that linear data point and analyzed the metadata, we're looking at things like, you know, what's the path, what's the size, what are the ACL details, what are the file attributes, is this encrypted or is it not? There's a lot of other things that we look at as well, but it's leveraging that metadata that we collect during that backup environment to be able to find out what's normal, right? So we have this, what we call a metadata sync process to help us start in the inspection. Once that's done, we apply machine learning models to it. We call it a deep neural network. So that those machine learning looks at hey, I'm gonna get that baseline based on that linear snapshots that we're collecting, and then find out, hey, at what point in time do I see an anomaly? Hey, maybe I have some files at a higher, not only a change rate at the virtual machine level, but looking granular. Hey, a lot more files were added and deleted on this day versus what we've seen across the board. Hey, Mr. Customer, I think you should take a look at this as an abnormal behavior, and then take it a step further and look for encryption signatures as well. So not only are we looking at the file system analysis, we take it a step further after we see, like, hey, there's an anomaly of activity. Let me go a step further and look and see if I see any encryption signatures on those files, and being able to alert you with high confidence that, hey, these files, you have some abnormal behavior and it looks like these files have been encrypted, and we can tell you that with high confidence. One of the questions that I'll always get whenever we're talking about radar is, hey, this sounds great, but how accurate is it? So when we run our data, over 63,000 total samples, you know, the model, our algorithm generated only 54 total false positive alerts. So 99.9% accurate that, hey, you have been hit with ransomware when we say it and we alert you. So in my book, that's pretty darn accurate. You know, I'll take those. I'll take that 0.1% if I'm ever alerted to know that, hey, 99.9% of the time Rubrik's going to be right. So where does radar work today? Virtual machines, so VMware virtual machines, NAS file sets, whether it's stored locally on Rubrik or whether we're sending it directly to an archive location, and all we're doing is capturing the metadata and sending it directly to cheap and deep public or private cloud. And then also on physical environments too. Today we support Windows file sets, physicals, Linux as well, pretty much all the different flavors of Linux that are out there, and then Unix with AIX and Solaris. But with that, I'll jump in and walk through a live demonstration. So I'm logged into, this is a live Polaris environment. I'm logged into the dashboard. What you'll see is this is a lab environment. The SEs within Rubrik use this globally. So this is our playground, if you will. What you see is on this map are different locations where a Rubrik cluster or a Rubrik instance is installed. So within Polaris, there's a lot of different applications, those ones that I walked you through before, but you can come in and take a look at all my different clusters that I have installed. I can look at my inventory, and what inventory is those other applications that are cloud native or maybe within the data center as well. Office 365 subscription. I can look at my AWS EC2 instances, my Azure subscriptions as well, and be able to manage those natively, all with the same SLA across all these different workload types and data center types, if you will. And then, of course, I can do reports. Being able to report across my entire infrastructure, I can maybe create one compliance report for my 15 different sites that I have across the US or globally, and being able to show the auditors, yes, I am in compliance, I am backing this up like I'm supposed to and required to. But what we're gonna focus on today is the radar piece. So if you look at the top of the dashboard, I have an events. I show what's happened. I have critical events, I have some replication events, what events have been completed as a whole, and then archive events out there as well, or backup events, I'm sorry. What you see on the right-hand side, hey, I've actually detected 2 anomalies within the past 24 hours powered by radar. And if I drill down and click on that, I have a couple of anomalies that pop up. One of them was from early this morning, and another one was more recent. just a couple of hours ago. So if I drill down a little further, hey, I want to investigate that alert and that anomaly, and this will get emailed out and sent out to folks as well to notify you that there's been an anomaly detected. Once I click on, I say, hey, that within this virtual machine, I see 1,800 files that were deleted, and then there's another 1,800 that created. I'm seeing 1,885 suspicious files, and with a high level of confidence that these have been encrypted. If you look at the event timeline, again, we look, and the first thing we look for is that file system. Hey, what's going on in the file system and what's different? What's not normal based on what we've looked at over time, and find out that baseline of what typically happens on this system. And then once we find that, we'll go a step further and look for those encrypted files. Right? We detected a high number of encrypted files after we noticed that there was some anomalous behavior happening, and then reported out, hey, it looks like we found something. And the idea is, hey, we found this on day 1 after the attack versus day 3 or day 7 or day 14 once you get that ransom note. Being able to find it early and then being able to detect exactly what's been hit is absolutely key. So now I can investigate. Okay, yes, this does look like a ransomware event. Now let me take a look and see what's been impacted. When you go to the view, this is a common view that all of us on the call know. I mean, it just looks like a browser. So I can see immediately that, hey, I have 2 volumes on this particular virtual machine. All the suspicious events are on this individual volume. I can drill down a little further, and then it takes me and I say, hey, it's the only folder that it's on is actually my file shares, which is pretty common in a ransomware event, being able to get on that network and delete files that are out there and being shared. If I click on the file shares, it shows me all the different folders within that file share folder that there's some suspicious activity on. Each one's been impacted. I can click on the engineering department and go to the individual files. And we say, hey, this was the file before, and it's been deleted, and it's been replaced with this file that's been encrypted, and this looks suspicious. Now, yes, if I find that this data is indeed, hey, I have been hit by ransomware, it's so simple to recover. I could come individually and click on the files that I want to recover, and click on next, or I could come back to the file shares and click on multiple. Hey, maybe I want to recover all of these, and click next. Right? I want to restore them. I can overwrite my originals, or maybe I want to recover them to a separate folder, which is pretty common when you're recovering from a security event like that. If I want to recover them, all I have to do is click on this recover button, and that entire process is automated for you. So Rubrik we're immutable. I mean, we find those, we can't be deleted. We detect when something has occurred, and then we build that remediation plan that's so difficult and so time consuming for end users once they realize that they've been hit with ransomware. Pretty simple. I mean, that's Radar. Almost in depth, if you will. We try to make everything really simple within Rubrik to do, and it doesn't get much simpler than that to actually recover from a ransomware event. With that, we have a couple of, let me switch back over. We have, it's a few success stories that I just wanted to highlight. I mean, one of them is in our territory in the Southeast. This was Mr. Good actually had to present to the board for the city of Durham and describe what happened when they were attacked, and then how did they recover. He was quoted in that presentation to the board that, hey, one of the reasons we purchased Rubrik was because it was a backup system that could not be consumed by ransomware. It's immutable. We were the key reason why they were able to recover from that ransomware event. Right? Pretty powerful and public story that's available online. Happy Rubrik customer. In addition to that, we had Kern Medical Center. They were hit last year in June, and Rubrik, that since we're immutable and we're were fully automated, we're able to quickly help them recover 100% of the systems that Rubrik was protecting. So pretty powerful. Once, hey, we never want you to get hit, but once you do, just know that Rubrik has your back. But with that, that's what we wanted to walk through today. I mean, in summary, again, we give you that ability to instantly recover, whether it's virtual machines, whether it's files at a granular level. We again, you can also live mount databases with SQL or Oracle as well. But the key thing, that first building block is we're immutable, uniquely immutable. Like again, we're the only file system on the market that was purpose built for data protection and data protection only, right? And that's very important. And then that visibility into the impact of the attack that I just showed you live within Polaris. So being able to see exactly what's been impacted and give you the ability to recover is very powerful. But with that, Clint, we have any questions you want to cover?
Yeah, so a couple that came in. So one that we just got in is, can you go over the tier storage options with Azure? Not sure if that is something we can quickly discuss, or if that may just be something we want to sideline until after this webinar, but wanted to throw that at you real quickly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for long-term retention, if that's what the question is referring to, I think it is yeah, we support a blob storage, and we've recently added support for archive tier, and we can automatically, with tight integration with Microsoft, automate the archival as well. So if you have long-term retention that's beyond 6 months, multi-years, maybe you want it to land on the cold blob first, and then archive it out to that cheap and deep archive tier automatically, because that data is typically never going to be needed or recovered. You just have to have it for compliance reasons. But if you need it, it's there to be able to recover. But yeah, we integrate there, and that's automated within the Rubrik SLA. It's just a simple definition in the Rubrik SLA and say, hey, after X amount of time, I want you to move this into that archive tier off of hot or cold blob. We can go into more detail if there's more follow-up needed later.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, another couple questions. So is really around scalability with Rubrik, if you want to kind of hit on that.
Yeah, it's one of the key components of Rubrik. So think of like a web scale environment. Rubrik can scale as small as like a 2U appliance to really infinite. There's no limit. When we scale out, we're not only scaling capacity, we're scaling performance as well. So you're not caught into the conundrum of, hey, I've got to be able to have a crystal ball and forecast out for 5 years and make sure I buy the correct model for my data protection needs to make sure that I'm going to be able to not have to buy another one on the side in a couple of years. Rubrik seamlessly scales out. It's very easy, completely online to be able to do that. And then also within the cloud, things like Radar, Sonar, our Office 365 offerings, all of that automatically scales up and down for customers. So there's no heavy lifting or anything for the end user to actually do on that side. We'll scale with you as your environment grows.
Great, awesome, thanks, Ryan. And then the final question kind of pertains to Polaris, but the customer wants to know, are you sending data to Polaris when leveraging the tool?
No, it's a good question. So the only information that ever gets sent to Polaris is metadata, so data about data. We know the customer data never leaves their data center, if you will, unless they're replicating, set a policy up to go to another data center, archive out to a cloud. So what lands in Polaris, there's absolutely no customer data at all. We go through we're very stringent on security, and oftentimes when we talk to customers, that comes up, and we have a lot of documentation that supports it. But yeah, absolutely no data. Privacy is very important to us.
For sure. Just had one more question come in. So how long is the regular engagement model when setting up the environment?
I mean, that's a big, and it depends. So, but I mean, when you look at like the initial installation, I mean, a full Rubrik cluster can be installed in a matter of minutes and hours. The longest part of it's typically racking and stacking it, getting that installed. If it's a fully virtual environment, it can be completely set up in really a day. But if I have a physical environment where I'm going to slow roll it and put connectors out there and protect it, you know, you can add a few more days to it. It really just depends on how large that environment is and what it looks like. In the early days of Rubrik, we didn't even have a dedicated PS organization because it was so simple. But as our environments get larger, we have a pretty robust professional services team and project management team that walk you through. But I can say with certainty that it's a much faster and easier engagement model than probably what most folks are used to with legacy providers.
Awesome. Got one more, and then any support or roadmap for Azure files?
Well, I can't get, so right now Azure files, like as a like SaaS application or platform as a service, that is something that we're looking at. But today that's not natively on built into Polaris, but that's something that we're looking at and adding. I can't get specifics to on roadmap on the webinar, but happy to have a follow-up and give you more details on that.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, I think that wraps up the Q&A. I haven't seen any more come in. So thank you all for the questions you provided. Ryan, any last comments that you want to make before we wrap up?
No, I just really appreciate the time. Myself and our teams across the Southeast are available and ready if anybody wants to have any follow-ups. Love to get engaged, and I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly there, Ryan. Definitely want to continue these conversations. These are some great questions we've had come in, so feel free to carry on the conversation. Once we follow up with everyone with the recording of the webinar, as well as any other details, we'll provide the slide deck and some of those collateral details. And yeah, look forward to continuing the conversation with those that are interested or just want to talk roadmap with us about what your data protection strategy looks like today and how we can improve upon that with Rubrik. So thank you all again. Absolutely just stellar support from all of you guys for joining us today. Our attendee list got over 100. So thank you all for joining and supporting us, and look forward to having conversations in the near short-term future and continue to grow a partnership. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll look forward to being in touch. Take care.